What if everything you were taught about ancient Egypt was a carefully crafted lie? We have all been fed the romanticized illusion of a golden civilization where women walked as equals alongside men, ruling empires, wearing exquisite jewelry, and holding unmatched legal power. We see the majestic statues of Cleopatra, Nefertiti, and Hatshepsut, and we assume that ancient Egypt was an ancient paradise for women. But if you look past the glittering gold and beneath the grand monuments, you discover a horrifying truth that history textbooks intentionally overlook. For the vast majority of women in ancient Egypt, life was not filled with royalty, power, or freedom. It was a brutal cycle of extreme physical labor, lethal medical practices, forced child marriages, and painful, early deaths. Today, we are stripping away the myths and exposing the dark, painful, and terrifying reality of what it truly meant to be a woman in ancient Egypt. To truly understand the dark side of Egyptian life, we must first shatter the myth of equality. Historians frequently point out that Egyptian women could own land, initiate a divorce, enter legal contracts, and represent themselves in court. While this was technically true on paper, these rights were almost exclusively enjoyed by the top 1%, the elite, noble, and royal women living in luxury. For an ordinary woman living in a mud brick village along the Nile, legal rights meant absolute nothing when survival itself was a daily struggle. Society was deeply patriarchal. A woman's identity, safety, and social standing were entirely defined by the men in her life. First her father, and then her husband. If a woman had no male protector or possessed no personal wealth, the legal system offered her virtually no protection against exploitation, starvation, or abuse. For an ordinary Egyptian woman, her main societal obligation from a young age was childbearing. Society viewed a woman primarily as a vessel for carrying on the family line. However, becoming pregnant in ancient Egypt was akin to signing your own death warrant. Medical science in the modern sense did not exist. There were no sterile hospitals, no pain relief, and no trained obstetricians. When a woman went into labor, she was placed in a small, unventilated room or on the roof of her house. She was made to squat on 2 rough mud bricks, known as birth bricks, while female relatives or local midwives assisted her. Rather than relying on hygienic medical techniques, delivery relied almost entirely on magical spells, prayers, and protective amulets meant to ward off evil spirits. Due to the complete absence of sanitation and medical understanding, childbirth was extremely deadly. Roughly 1 out of every 3 women died during delivery or shortly afterward from severe postpartum infections and uncontrollable hemorrhaging. If a mother was fortunate enough to survive the ordeal of labor, the nightmare was far from over. Infant mortality was catastrophically high, with nearly 50% of newborn babies dying before reaching their first birthday due to infections, poor sanitation, and illness. This meant that women were forced into a continuous, exhausting cycle of pregnancy after pregnancy just to ensure that 1 or 2 children survived into adulthood, destroying their physical health in the process. Even more disturbing were the methods used for contraception and female reproductive health. Ancient Egyptian medical texts, such as the famous Kahun gynecological papyrus, reveal remedies that sound more like torture than medicine. To prevent unwanted pregnancies, women were instructed to insert mixtures containing crocodile dung, sour milk, and honey directly into their bodies. Crocodile dung was believed to act as a physical barrier and an acidic spermicide. In reality, introducing animal waste into the body caused massive, deadly bacterial infections, severe inflammatory diseases, and toxic shock. Women were routinely poisoning their own reproductive organs in a desperate bid to control their own bodies, often paying for it with their lives. If a woman survived the lethal dangers of childbirth, her daily life was one of relentless, crippling physical labor. The idealized paintings on tomb walls show serene women in clean white linen dresses, but archaeological evidence reveals a vastly different story. Modern bioarchaeologists studying the skeletal remains of non-royal women from ancient Egyptian cemeteries have uncovered shocking physical trauma etched directly into their bones. Most female skeletons exhibit severe, advanced osteoarthritis, chronic joint degeneration, and permanent spinal deformities starting at shockingly young ages. This severe physical decay was the direct result of their primary daily chore, hand-grinding grain into flour. Every day, women spent hours kneeling on hard stone floors, hunched over heavy granite slabs called saddle querns, pushing heavy stones back and forth to crush wheat and barley. This repetitive, back-breaking motion placed immense pressure on their knees, lower backs, and shoulders. Furthermore, the rough granite stones used for grinding constantly shed microscopic rock dust and sand into the flour. When this flour was baked into bread, the daily staple of the Egyptian diet, it contained millions of tiny abrasive particles. Eating this gritty bread literally filed their teeth down to the raw nerves and jawbone. This caused excruciating dental abscesses, massive jaw infections, and systemic blood poisoning, which frequently proved fatal. As a direct result of relentless labor and chronic infection, the average lifespan for a common Egyptian woman was a mere 30 to 35 years. Their youth was consumed by agonizing labor, and their short lives ended in overwhelming physical pain. The social structure of marriage was equally oppressive for young women. In ancient Egypt, marriage was not a romantic union or a sacred religious ceremony. It was essentially a private domestic agreement arranged to manage household labor and inheritance. Young girls were commonly given in marriage as soon as they reached puberty, often between the ages of 12 and 14, to men who were significantly older. At 12 years old, a young girl had no autonomy, no education, and no say in her future. She was transitioned immediately from a child into a domestic laborer and childbearer. Furthermore, if a woman proved to be infertile, her husband had the absolute legal right to repudiate her, cast her out of the home, or bring a second wife into the household. In a society where a woman's entire livelihood depended on her husband's household, being divorced for infertility left her financially ruined, socially humiliated, and cast out to the absolute margins of society. For those at the very bottom of the social hierarchy, the female slaves, life was an inescapable nightmare. Women captured in foreign military campaigns or sold into bondage due to unbearable family debts had zero legal rights. They were legally classified as physical property, no different than livestock or furniture. Female slaves were subjected to the hardest physical labor, working in hot fields or noble kitchens, and were completely vulnerable to physical and sexual abuse by their male owners. The legal contracts that historians praise so often did not apply to them. They had no voice, no legal defense, and no hope of freedom, serving as the invisible backbone of an empire that treated them as entirely disposable. Even the rare women who reached the absolute peak of power in the royal court were trapped in a horrifying system. To preserve the divine bloodline of the pharaohs and keep power within the family, royal families practiced systematic inbreeding and incest. Royal women were routinely forced to marry their own full brothers, half-brothers, uncles, and sometimes even their own fathers. This continuous, generation-spanning incest caused devastating genetic mutations, chronic physical deformities, immune deficiencies, and extremely high rates of stillbirths within the royal dynasties. The famous golden masks of royalty concealed severe physical disabilities and genetic illnesses born directly from these forced incestuous unions. Consider the tragic reality behind the reign of Hatshepsut, one of the most remarkable female rulers in human history. After the death of her husband, she seized power and led Egypt into an era of incredible wealth, artistic growth, and massive architectural achievement. Yet, despite her brilliant leadership, Egyptian society could not accept a woman ruling as pharaoh. To legitimize her position on the throne, Hatshepsut had to erase her female identity in official art. She was depicted with a muscular male physique, wearing traditional male royal kilts, and wearing a ceremonial false beard strapped to her chin. Society demanded that she hide her womanhood to be respected. And even more tragically, after her death, her male successors attempted to systematically erase her from history altogether, smashing her statues, defacing her monuments, and scraping her name off official king lists in an effort to wipe her legacy from human memory. When we look past the romanticized legends, the golden artifacts, and the impressive pyramids, we see the true cost of ancient Egyptian civilization. It was a world built on the backs of women who suffered in silence. An ordinary woman's life was defined by the constant threat of lethal childbirth, primitive and dangerous medical practices, back-breaking daily labor that destroyed her body, early forced marriages, and absolute dependence on men for survival. The next time you look at the breathtaking monuments of Egypt, remember the millions of forgotten women whose short, painful lives paid for that ancient glory. What are your thoughts on the hidden, dark reality of ancient Egypt? Were you surprised to learn about the true lives of ordinary women behind the golden myths? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video insightful and authentic, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep, unfiltered dives into world history. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.